Hello world, my name is Andy Silvers, and today we're going to talk about that time I was almost scammed. There are some lessons that you can learn the easy way, and there are some lessons that you can learn the hard way, but I think we all agree we want to avoid learning lessons the hard way. Now, in this video, I will explain that I technically did not learn the lesson the hard way, but I did still learn a lesson, and I want to convey that lesson to you. Be aware that as a newbie writer, there are a lot of different types of scams to be on the lookout for. There's a lot of people who want your money, there's a lot of people who want your attention. So, you need to be aware of different kinds of scams, and you need to be aware of how to avoid them. Now, I do not claim to be an expert on all different types of online scams, so in that case, I will turn you to a Facebook page called Writer Beware. This is a Facebook page that I would suggest looking at and checking out some of the posts to get a general idea for the kinds of scams that writers can expect. This includes screenwriters and authors, I believe, and I believe comic book writers as well. So any kind of writer, this is the kind of page that you'll want to check out. By the way, I do not necessarily endorse every single thing on this Facebook page. I am simply giving you a suggestion to check out the sort of general types of information that they provide. About a week ago, I received an email that looked like this from someone. I have redacted certain portions to reserve my and their privacy. However, this is generally what the email says. And the email came from someone that I had never heard of, and basically they claimed to be an editor for a major publishing house. They said that they wanted to translate my most recent work, Solomon Grando versus the Jupiter Witch, into Italian, and that they could publish my book in certain international European markets. Now, on the surface level, this already seems suspicious, because why Italian? Why European markets? Why not publish an American book in America? And that is certainly a red flag. In fact, this email has a number of red flags, including, for instance, that the first word in the first paragraph isn't capitalized. Notice the word my. My name, the M is not capitalized, which is a little suspicious because why would the name not be capitalized, the word not be capitalized, if this is a professional email from a legitimate publishing house? So I received this email about a week ago, and I do make the mistake of believing that it is entirely legitimate, and I send them a list of questions and a copy of my manuscript of Solomon Grando versus the Jupiter Witch. To note, this is the biggest mistake that I made. This is the single biggest mistake, was giving them a copy of the manuscript without doing more vetting. Now, I'm not an idiot. I did do some vetting, but there's a sort of coincidental reasoning why I was more trusting of this particular message than I otherwise would normally be. Now, as someone who is familiar with the movie industry, I am familiar with Vertigo Comics. So Vertigo is actually a sort of subsidiary of DC Comics. DC as in like Batman and such. And so I thought this was Vertigo as in DC Vertigo, which is a legitimate publishing house that creates DC Comics. Now, if they had asked about my book Red Sprites and Blue Jets, I probably wouldn't have sent them anything. But the coincidence of them being from Vertigo, or from a company called Vertigo, is actually what led to the whole confusion in the first place. My book is called Solomon Grando versus the Jupiter Witch. DC Comics has a character called Solomon Grundy, which is obviously very similar to the name. I should note that when I came up with Solomon Grando, I did not know anything about the DC comic character Solomon Grundy at the time. I was informed about it later by a friend. But I didn't change the name of my character because I really liked the name and I felt that it was clearly its own distinct thing. In other words, I thought Vertigo Publishing, as in DC Vertigo, was reaching out to me thinking I had created fanfic or something like fanfic, and that they were trying to just get a sense for maybe if I had created good fanfic, because maybe then they want to reach out to me and talk to me or maybe work with me in some way. So, in other words, normally I probably wouldn't have been so trusting, but due to the coincidence of the fact that the sort of scam publishing house happened to be called Vertigo, DC Vertigo happens to be a real thing that publishes something called Solomon Grundy. All this is what led me to believe that this was more legitimate than it was. I sent them a list of questions, and unfortunately I sent them the manuscript as well, which was the biggest mistake I made in this whole thing. So that's why I say I didn't learn, quote-unquote, the hard way, because nothing particularly terrible occurred, but certainly you're going to want to take lessons from this if this ever happens to you, which is a newbie author, and namely as a self-published author. That's where this situation is most likely to occur, because you don't have a publishing house that is already signed with you that is going to just dismiss this stuff immediately. I looked into it and I discovered DC Vertigo, which means that I didn't look into it far enough. Because if I had looked into it far enough, I would have discovered that Vertigo Publishing House is technically a real publisher and they are based in Italy. However, they're sort of a scam publisher, meaning that they're basically a pay-for-play. They charge authors money to purchase copies of their own book, and then they publish it that way. So basically, they're getting your book out for free for them, and they're making money off of you. Now, I didn't give them a penny of my money, and I'm lucky that I did not. Although I do want to say, for my own defense, that I wouldn't have anyway, because I understand the way that publishing works, traditional publishing. You do not pay your literary agent, and you do not pay your publisher. They pay you. If a literary agent asks for some upfront fee, then they'll probably sketch, because literary agents make money when you sell books. And really it's the same with the publisher. They make money when they sell your book, and then they give you a cut of it. So obviously I wasn't going to buy copies of my own book, and I want to be clear that I never got to that stage. Remember, this situation happened about a week ago, so they have not gotten back to me at this point. Vertigo Publishing has not yet returned my email. You'll want to be very skeptical of any email received from anyone, and even if they name an actual legitimate publishing house, like if they name, I don't know, Macmillan, for instance. They may not actually be from Macmillan or from Simon & Schuster, for instance. So you want to be extremely careful that you do not let your excitement over being traditionally published cloud your judgment. And again, I really don't think I let my excitement overcloud my judgment as much as it might seem on the surface, because again, it is a coincidence that Vertigo Publishing just so happens to be the name of DC Publishing's house, of a subset of DC that just so happens to publish a comic that features Solomon Grundy. That's basically the web of coincidences that largely led to this situation. Anyway, I did some research, discovered it was a scam, and obviously I am no longer going to work with them in any way, shape, or form. I'm not going to give them any money, and I'm not going to give them copies of my book. However, I still had one concern. Don't they still have a copy of my manuscript? Which just goes to show you need to be extremely careful who you give your manuscript to. I was worried that Vertigo Publishing was going to basically steal my manuscript and try to print the book themselves. So I reached out to some sources, some online sources that will remain anonymous. I reached out to some sources to find some more information, because obviously I wasn't going to give Vertigo any money, but I still knew they had my manuscript. So I wanted to know, was I okay? And it turns out the answer is yes. Places like this, places that are actually legitimate publishers, technically speaking. So Vertigo Publishing House is an actual publishing house in Italy. However, they're a scam publishing house, meaning they will publish your book, technically speaking, but they're going to charge you for it. As a general rule, most companies, even if they're scam companies, are going to have no interest in just downright stealing your work. And the reason for this is because of copyright, because they don't want you to sue them. Scam publishing houses, first off, don't want to spend a bunch of money on lawyers. They don't want to spend a bunch of time and energy on the lawsuit. And most importantly, they don't want to lose the lawsuit, which they would do because they don't have any evidence that they owned your book other than the fact that they just so happen to have a PDF version of it. My book was available for sale through Lulu. So in other words, if I had been able to sue, obviously Lulu, who has a financial stake in my book, would have gone to bat for me and said, no, Vertigo does not own the rights to this book. That's nonsense. And I want to say that I recently actually got Solomon Grando an official copyright with the U.S. Copyright Office, which I recommend that you do. I paid a one-time $65 fee with the U.S. Copyright Office to have Solomon Grando versus the Jupiter Witch officially copyrighted, which will help me immensely in the future, especially with regard to perhaps adaptations. Like if Solomon Grando were to become a film or TV show, it would be extremely beneficial to me to own the copyright. Basically, Vertigo Publishing has no interest in trying to just sell my manuscript in some form or another, because that's not the kind of scam that they are. That's not how they operate. However, I still made the mistake of giving them my manuscript in the first place, which is something that I learned. I also learned exactly how scam publishers tend to work. They want to charge you money for the privilege of publishing your own book. So don't fall for it. I didn't fall for it, but I certainly got close to falling for it. And I think it's important that you learn the lesson from me so that you don't make the same mistake. Anyway, on the subject of Solomon Grando, the book is technically available. So the paperback only is available on Amazon. At the time of filming this, the ebook and hardcover are not available. The ebook is weird because I finished it. It just isn't showing up yet. I think it just takes a while, which is really annoying, but I will definitely tell you when it's ready. That should be $6. So I'll tell you when that's ready. However, the paperback is available right now for $14. So on Amazon.com, the paperback is ready. You can get that anytime. And then the ebook of Solomon Grando is technically available on Barnes & Noble. So if you really want the ebook right now, you can get the Barnes & Noble version right now if you want to do that. However, I suspect that many of you will want to get the Amazon Kindle version, which is not currently available, but I will let you know when it is. Solomon Grando versus the Jupiter Witch is my latest novel. It is a contemporary fantasy book. It has got action, comedy, adventure, heart. It's really good. It's really exciting. People who have read it so far love it and think it's amazing. So I think that you will also enjoy it. If you're wondering if it's for you, basically it's a lot like a Marvel film. So if you like the Marvel films, the general sort of tone and feel, then you'll definitely like Solomon Grando versus the Jupiter Witch. I am currently working on the sequel, Solomon Grando the Titan Contract, that is sort of in early development right now. As for other projects I'm working on, I have a sort of list of different books that I want to work on, which I think that all authors should do. They should have like a brainstorm, basically, on a spreadsheet or a piece of paper somewhere that basically says, these are all the ideas I have. Maybe they'll become a book, maybe they won't, but it's nice to have them written down. So basically, there's two sort of things that are going on. So I have a new idea for a book called The Wildest West that I may work on soon. However, the book that's next in line is Solomon Grando 2, the sequel, which makes sense, because that's the sort of the freshest sort of thing in my mind right now, so it's nice to write when you're fresh. And then there's another interesting situation. So there's a film, I'm not going to mention the film right now, but there is a very low-budget indie film that I really like, and the director who made it was green, meaning that he was new to directing. And I really like the film. It's really important to me. It holds a special place in my heart. And basically what I want to do is I want to email this director, who is also the writer, and say, hey, I really love this film. It's really special to me. Is there any way you could give me permission to do a novelization of your film? He may say no, he may say yes. I don't know. It's really up in the air. But once the Solomon Grando ebook is available, I will email him, and I will ask him if this is even something he would consider. Also, my children's book for ages 3 to 6 is still out. It is called The Very Colorful Caterpillar. It is done well on Amazon. It has 5 out of 5 stars thus far. It is really well written. I have 2 people who have read it who are both elementary school teachers who think it's fantastic. So if you have a kid, grandkid, or relative who's between the ages of 3 and 6, this is a great book for their reading enjoyment. So be sure to pick that up. Anyway, please like and subscribe. It really helps me when you do that. Comment on the video. Tell me if you've encountered any scams yourself and what that was like, and if you fell for it or not and what you learned. And of course, give me ideas for future video suggestions. If there's anything you want me to cover, please tell me about it in the comments below. Thank you and have a great day.